Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explain series. I am Kushagra Goel. On the day of January 22nd, the most important news is from an editorial section, right? So we'll be covering that then and there. That becomes the most important highlight. There is a concept of that needs to be understood within that. So bear with the explanation, that would be a little lengthier, right? So on that note, let's begin with today's newspaper. So on the front page, there is a decision on Rajiv case to be taken soon. Supreme Court is told that Tamil Nadu governor will take a call on Perarivalan in 3 to 4 days. What is this? This is a case about mercy petition before the governor. That unreasonable length of mercy petition cannot be granted, right? And that Tamil Nadu governor should be taking a timely decision on that matter. The petition has been pending for since 2018 in general, right? But overall this petition has been pending for a longer time period, right? The power is discussed under Article 161 of the Constitution. This is a topic that we have covered multiple times before, right? So I suggest all of you to go through the Google Drive where we have done a detailed discussion of this power of the governor to pardon, right? Rather than repeating it again, I suggest the viewers should go back and check that entire discussion all over again, right? Now, unfortunate event also took place at the Serum Institute's factory, which is the major institution manufacturing institution of global importance, because it is the one manufacturing the AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine, right? So overall, as per the news, there has been no damage to the COVID-19 vaccine facility, right? And on the front page is also the news of Joe Biden revoking most 17 executive orders about overturning his predecessor's decision, that is Donald Trump's, right? So apart from that, moving ahead, on the front page is another news. It is about Facebook officials' right to remain silent. Now, what is this controversy? This controversy is about Facebook's apparent bias to propagate hateful content by one particular party or one kind of section of the society. Why? In general, because see, as per the platform's guideline, any kind of hate speech should be removed immediately. The allegation is against Facebook that they do not remove hate speech that is propagated by right-wing organizations. So that is the inquiry that Delhi Assembly has been undertaking, right? Now, within that, they had asked senior Facebook official, that is Ajit Mohan, to appear before it and tell what is the policy of Facebook. On that note, Facebook had responded that, see, we have a right to remain silent. On the same point, the Facebook company has also approached the Supreme Court and made the same remark, that the assembly has no right to call us for hearing before it, right? So this is an ongoing proceeding that we'll have to keep a note of, right? Moving ahead on the national news, this is ongoing national debates about the farmer protest or pending petitions, not really relevant from CLAT perspective, right? So on that note, we'll go ahead with the editorial section, right? So the main editorial, as I stated, is something that is of relevance for all of us, right? Now, from a general CLAT perspective, this is not really of an academic point of view, right? But it is something that needs to be understood. Now, what is this? This editorial is talking about a particular case. What is this case? This is the case of Arnab Goswami, within which he was granted bail by the Supreme Court, right? Now, there has been a lot of debate about this. This article is not about the correctness of the Supreme Court's bail or whether court has upheld civil liberties of other people or not. This article is not about that. What is this article about? Is that there are two kinds of questions that needs to be asked when a case is framed against a person. What are they? They are, the court need to recognize the selective prosecution as a threshold for constitutional defense against abuse of state power. The editorial states that there is one mechanism which through which the state can impose its power on the people. That is to prosecute people and then restrain them, right? Now in general, for example, when you violate traffic lights or traffic rules, right, there is another person in front of you is also not wearing helmet, right? And then you are also stopped. Now that person may not be stopped, but the policeman stops you. The excuse you want to make is, sir, you did not stop that person, but why are you stopping me, right? So the ingrained application is of Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, that the law should be applied equally. There should be no selective prosecution. That is exactly what this article is also making a case of, that the legislature or the police executive, that is the prosecution wing, should not have selective prosecution, that a person should not be prosecuted based on his actions. If a law is to be applied, it should be applied equally for all the people, right? Now the allegation against the case that Arnab Goswami made before the Supreme Court was this, that the reason why he is being prosecuted is not with. So there are two kinds of questions that can be asked when a prosecution is initiated. First, whether there is selective prosecution. Is the law being applied equally? And then secondly, whether the person is actually liable against the certain law or has actually done the wrongdoing. The article states that in a constitutional society, the first question, that whether the law has been applied selectively or not, becomes the most important question. But it recognizes that in India, the first question that is asked is whether the case is really correct or not, whether you have actually done the wrong or not. So going back to our traffic police example, the fact that you were not wearing the helmet is held against you and you are held liable. Now whether there was selective application or not becomes irrelevant. But what the editorial and the Supreme Court made a note of in the case of Arnab Goswami was that there was selective prosecution in the particular case, and that is why in a constitutional society, the first question that needs to be asked is whether there has been selective prosecution or not. And that becomes a constitutional question, that in appellant courts, that is Supreme Court and High Court, the first question these courts should be making is whether there was selective prosecution or not. And if there was, then the person should be let go of or not be curtailed, right? So this article is basically making that theme. Overall, the overall discourse of jurisprudence has been borrowed from United States and has been applied selectively in the Supreme Court in two particular cases. The most prominent one is the case of Arnab Goswami and there is another case, that was Romila Thapar versus Union of India, wherein the Supreme Court stated the basic entitlement of every citizen who is faced with allegations of criminal wrongdoing is to investigate, that the investigative process should be fair, and there is an integral component of guarantee against arbitrariness in Article 14, right? So that everyone has been treated equally, and on that basis this particular person is being prosecuted. So that becomes the most important understanding is before a constitutional court for constitution to be upheld in India. Now whether that is done or not on a long term basis is a debate. The reason why we need to also discuss this editorial is because it has been written by G. Mohan Gopal, who is the former director of NLS Bangalore and the National Judicial Academy at Bhopal, right? So therefore the importance of the person and the point that he is making becomes important from the point of understanding. So there are two things to understand. One, as per this, there should be no selective prosecution, and then the question should come whether the person is actually liable of wrongdoing or not, right? So moving ahead, then on the left hand side, American healing, Biden must build on bipartisan goodwill to further his agenda of a more perfect union. That see, United States is now a divided society, and Joe Biden can only go ahead with this progressive agenda when there is bipartisan support and there is some amount of healing towards the Donald Trump supporters who believe that the election was stolen against them, right? Then on the left hand side, privacy and surveillance. What this talks about is again the problem with the new WhatsApp regulations, right? So again, what we have come to know is WhatsApp is applying a different mechanism in Europe, where there is a privacy law which is the GDPR, and then in rest of the world, which is specifically India. So the union government has asked WhatsApp, why are you applying it selectively? But the main problem that the editorial addresses for us here is that first, data localization is not the only solution. That is, even if, for example, what is data localization? So I am an Indian, I reside in India, my data that is generated through WhatsApp is generated within India. This data should not be stored in a US server or any server outside India. That is data localization. The problem that the editorial highlights with this is that, one, data localization is not a remedy for privacy. One, there can be data duplication, and two, local data theft can also take place. Secondly, the long-term solution to avoid such differential practices of tech companies is to have our very own privacy or data protection law, something that the parliament has not done, which it should do, is what the editorial makes a point for, right? Then moving ahead, getting it wrong on India's level of agriculture support. Now this is specifically talking about OECD's mechanism of whether a country is actively supporting agriculture in that particular state or not. So OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, talks about this mechanism. So let's say in India, rice is sold at 10 rupees per kg. Internationally, it is sold for 30 rupees per kg, adjusting it for different currencies. So there is a deficit of 20 rupees, right? Now, OECD would believe that there is a 20 rupee deficit of government support. That what this means is, if there is governmental support, domestic prices and foreign prices of a commodity will always be the same. Now this is something that we all know is not correct, because if, for example, you are procuring a produce locally or manufacturing it yourself, you will have it for a cheaper price in comparison to someone who is getting it at a export rate, right? So this is a mechanism, a critique of the OECD's mechanism, and what this deals with is that in general this mechanism is flawed, and how it does not generally reflect the correct state of governmental support for agriculture, right? Then moving ahead, this is a questionnaire discussion about whether the Supreme Court is interfering unreasonably in executive matters or not. This has come into fore after there were ongoing discussion between farmer unions and the government, and the Supreme Court interfered and appointed a committee which is also believed by farmers to be biased towards the union, right? So this is generally a discussion whether this should be done or not, right? Then moving ahead, on the left hand side, a case to dispose of mercy petition swiftly. So this is again discussion of mercy petition, governor and presidential power, and says that how Pranab Mukherjee during his time period disposed of 34 mercy petitions within his tenure, and this is a similar mechanism that all the other presidents and constitutional bodies should follow, that there should be a fixed time frame to decide upon mercy petitions, right? Then moving ahead, on the national news, not much relevance for us. There is in general political news of no real relevance from academic point of view. That is not something it matters. The CoWIN platform again is the main one where vaccine registration and details is provided. So that is the name that becomes really important for all of us. Then apart from that, on the national news, there is no real update for us to make a note of. Going ahead, Senate confirming Joe Biden's administration. This is now default because Democratic Party has majority in the Senate, right? Then this is statement from China about relation between US and China in general. And then there is a news here. It is Google and French press ink copyright payments deal. This is about Google making a payment to news platforms wherein Google uses the news of these different agencies. So a particular license fee has to be paid to news agencies for using their news on Google platform. Now this becomes really important because it now talks about equitable treatment, that you cannot unreasonably benefit from someone else's content. Whosoever created the content should be justifiedly paid for it, right? So this is a recognition of that. And moving ahead, in general, on the economic front, again, there is not much news. There is hope that mass vaccination would increase or point the economy towards a more growth trajectory. That is to be seen in general. And then moving ahead, on the sporting front, again, the Indian team has returned from Australia from its triumph, and there is positive news. There is overall positive support for them, and that is it for the day. The most important news on 22nd January was the concept of Article 14 and the concept of presidential and governor pardon, right? The power to pardon. So those two become the most important news. We have discussed the power to pardon in depth before, so I suggest all the viewers to go through the Google Drive and Control F and find that particular video section of our series where we have discussed that in depth, and make a note of it then and there, because that is something that is part of your constitution that can be asked from CLAT examination. And the second thing is about the Arnab Goswami case. Facets of that has been in news all the time, so that particular case becomes really important from CLAT perspective. On that note, thank you so much. If you like the work that we are doing, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, do subscribe to it.